Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Rainmakers Roundup. I'm your host, Mark Iorio, and I have today with me a guest from New England, Mr. Paul Cronin. And Paul is an M&A advisor, more than that, but an M&A advisor with True North Advisors. Paul, welcome to the program. It's great to have you. It's been a while since we talked about doing this, and I'm really happy you're on.
Well, thanks so much, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation today.
You're very welcome. You know, I've had a million conversations with people over the years, running a business, about preparing for some sort of an event to take place. And you and I have had multiple conversations about this. Your style, your process is different, and I want you to talk a little bit about that, but also your career path, I think, over your lifetime has really prepared you to do what you're doing today, and I don't think you've wavered much in terms of how you approach an organization, a leader trying to exit or have some sort of an event, and you've had firsthand experience about it with it as well. So talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about your career path and how you've come to this point with True North.
A long time ago in a galaxy far away, right?
Not that long, man. I think we're about the same age.
Exactly. So sorry, well, there'll be no lasers today. But I guess the easiest way to explain it is I've had a now 40-year career in what most people would call sales, but I actually think that's a misnomer. I think the best people who have the title salesperson or business development, what have you, are really the best helpers.
Yeah.
And the saying I would tell people who are in the sales game is stop selling, start helping.
Yep.
Because ultimately you're trying to help an individual with an issue or a challenge or whatever. And if you help them come to some decision on that, then you've done your job. Sometimes your job is helping them acquire product and services that you represent. And sometimes it's not doing that because it's not the right thing for them. In either way, you help them. And that's really been, over the course of my life, how I viewed my career, and whether it was a customer or a client, a trusted relationship or more transactional, I've always tried to hold that in my mind as I'm working with people. And even in a networking type of environment, which is how you and I met, so I really try to think first about, how can I help this individual in some way, even if it's an introduction. And it's not because I'm like some really sweet guy. I think I'm sweet enough for a finance guy. It's just I just firmly believe that is foundational to my success.
Yeah.
So, in terms of my career, I started out, in New York City, right in Herald Square, for New Yorkers know where that is, and working for a manufacturer at like the lowest level of job you can have, and eventually worked my way into management. And over a very long period of time, we grew that business from single-digit millions to almost 100 million and had an exit.
Wow.
From there, I founded or co-founded 3 different companies in completely different businesses. And each one of those in many ways was somehow, as I like to say, is serving folks in some way, helping them with challenges, whether it was data analytics or golf instruction or exiting a business.
Yeah.
So the lessons that I learned from the last business that I was part of was an exit planning business, which kind of brings us, from there to morphing to the transactional side of the exiting, which is what I've been doing in more recent years. But that commonality is we're really doing the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, in an M&A transaction, you're fundamentally trying to help a buyer and seller come together. They may have slightly different goals, right? But the in order for each of them to achieve their goals, my job is to, quite frankly, get the deal done.
Yep.
So that each side, so it's funny. So it's not like they walk away from it amicably, although you'd like it to be that, and it's a kumbaya moment.
Yeah.
But it's more like each side got enough of what they needed, enough of their goals were accomplished, that doing the deal was the best outcome.
Yep. You said a few minutes ago that, you don't do it because you're a sweet guy, but you have a different mindset. A lot of times in sales, and I started my career, well, I didn't start my career, but early in my career, I got into the sales business. And many salespeople are looking at the transaction. They look at, I think they count their revenue before the deal's even done. And your approach with your mindset, Paul, where you are helping people first, a lot of skeptics could look at that and say, well, yeah, it's nice now. I mean, Paul's established. He's made, he's been successful. It's easy to say that now, but you've done that your entire life. And that to me is a mindset. And I think that's what differentiates you from a lot of other M&A advisors out there, because they're looking for the transaction. It's not about how I can, you've told me some great stories. I mean, how I can help you achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve is a very different approach than, hey, let's get these two companies together so I can end up with a success fee and walk away and go buy a house somewhere. I think your approach is very different, but you've been doing that forever.
Yeah, and it's a like to joke, only half joke about my peers, is most people in finance, obviously mergers and acquisition is part of the finance industry,
Yeah.
have a well-deserved reputation for being heartless bastards.
Exactly.
That on tape. You may have to zip that later, but heartless SOBs, maybe that's more polite. But regardless, and so I'm not trying to, fight against the tide, as I like to say, fruitless, but it's like, I just need to find those small number of business owners, sellers, and a small number of business buyers who get it and who get the way I work,
Yeah.
and the way my colleague works.
Yeah.
And, when I share with people, listen, I know what it's like to start a business, to buy a business, grow them, sell them personally. I know how hard it is.
Yeah.
And I know how hard it is to leave.
Yeah.
Both from the financial perspective, and the emotional perspective.
Of course.
I get all that.
Yeah.
And one of the things, one of the little jokes people who do M&A long enough know, and much the way of business coaching, consulting, is we give away a lot of unlicensed psychology.
True. Very true. You've got some really cool, great stories. Whether they're case studies or they're just programs that have taken place or events that have taken place that are really intriguing. You talk about this manufacturing facility that you're involved with, and some of these other companies, and I'd like you to share some of those stories, and like even some of the difficult moments that you had with the leader, the CEO, and how that you sort of helped him or her overcome those fears and those obstacles.
Yeah, I mean the challenge in for most smaller companies, and I should just help the audience understand. So we work with businesses in what's called the sub $50 million market,
Yep.
sometimes referred to as the lower middle market. So businesses that we represent will typically have a transaction of some ultimate value, whether it's cash and so forth, of somewhere between 5 million and 50 million. Realistically, most people come to us from 5 to 25 million because there's a whole lot more companies there than over 25 million.
Yeah, sure.
And also where we are a smaller group, we don't have, hundreds of people and vice presidents and associates. So because of that, we have to be smart about how we do it. And we have that the kind of clients we work with are smaller companies. And ideally, they've got people in place. They've got some management in place. They've got systems in place. That, some of the things you speak about and others speak about. But as I like to say, I've never sold a perfect business yet. But that's okay, because the imperfections of your business, all right, can become the opportunities for the buyer of your business.
Yeah.
They're not going to pay you for your imperfections, okay? Because they're going to take advantage of those with their capital and their time. But you're presenting the business as it is, and what you do and how you do it. And one example of a positive is someone who had, of all things, started a pharmacy and he wasn't a pharmacist. Now, he was motivated because a family member was ill. He had a very difficult long-term kind of health challenge, and realized that there were literally millions of people just like him that were very poorly served by the pharmaceutical industry, or pharmacy industry specifically.
Yep.
So he started this business and gradually built it up. Doing what you need to do with hiring pharmacists and so forth. But then at a certain point, he was actually so mission driven that most of his profits went back to support charities to help support research and so forth for the underlying health condition that his pharmacy specialized in. There were several conditions, I should say, blood disorders of some kind. And he gradually, was very passionate about it, but because he wasn't a pharmacist, he was not actually, filling the pills, right, kind of a thing. And he got to a place where he was just working a few hours a week. He had another family member kind of looking over the books who really understood, finance. And so he felt good about it. He built a nice small business and was profitable. And ultimately, we talked to probably about 100 different buyers. We ultimately winnowed that down to 6 candidates who recognized the opportunities, who recognized the imperfections, because there were clearly imperfections in this. And the gentleman was smart enough to understand that it's like, okay, this is going to be a different kind of a deal because of the nature of the clientele, the nature of the financials of the business, and how they get reimbursed. But that really didn't matter to the buyer, because the buyer was from the industry. He recognized the opportunity.
Yep.
And he was creative enough, and through a series of meetings and building relationships and breaking bread, you get the two sides together so that it is advantageous financially to both parties. Neither one is to say the buyer paid more than he wanted and the seller got less than he wanted. Yeah. To me, that's like, they actually probably got a good deal.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's just one example.
Paul, we're gonna have to take a quick commercial break here. We'll be right back, folks. We are sponsored by the Kessler Foundation, ladies and gentlemen. They help people with disabilities, traumatic brain injury, and spinal cord injury. They're a wonderful organization, and we thank them for their sponsorship. We'll be right back with more from Paul Cronin, M&A advisor with True North, right after this message from our sponsor. Don't go away.
Big Flamingo Insurance, what do you want?
Yeah, can we get the auto insurance policy?
Anything else?
Can we add an extra driver?
Number 4 combo, your premium comes with pickup spot 2.
Okay.
When it comes to insurance, you don't have to sacrifice service to save.
Wait, this isn't even the right policy.
Upgrade to NJM and get the 5-star customer service you deserve with discounts you'll love.
Excuse me, Mr. Rollerbird?
No jingles or mascots, just great insurance. NJM. Get a quote today.
You can be confident choosing Farmers Insurance. There's no need to knock on wood.
Perfect.
This is an unnatural amount of natural light.
Thank you.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Hey, Jake from State Farm. I want that personal price plan. So how's this for personal? I draw mustaches on players' faces when they're asleep.
Coach Reed, you don't need to get that personal to get the State Farm personal price plan. It helps you create an affordable price just for you.
Oh.
Coach, it happened again.
I'm gonna get to the bottom of this.
Call or click to get a quote today. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Mark Iorio. This is Rainmakers Roundup, and I have Paul Cronin with me. And Paul is an M&A advisor with True North Advisors. Paul, it's great to have you on the program. This is a great conversation. I think a lot of people understand a little bit more about, how you go about planning for an eventual event. And the reason I say event is because it's not always an exit. It's not always a merger. It could be an ESOP. It could be, anything that changes the sort of the structure of your business. And before the break, you were talking a little bit about a pharmacy that's sold. And when you hear 100, you've interviewed or gone through 100 different potential buyers, whittle it down to 6, and then eventually get to a buyer who is going to do the transaction. It's a lot of work, and they don't always go as planned, right?
Oh, they never go as planned. As they say, what's that saying? I think it was a fighter. He said, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face." I think it was Mike Tyson. And that's pretty much M&A. As a sidebar, what my although M&A stands for mergers and acquisitions.
Yep.
All right, my nickname for M&A really is migraines and aggravation. You got to have a really high tolerance. And that's actually, while it's a joke, it's actually what makes it very daunting for people who are trying to buy or sell a company.
Yeah.
Particularly sellers who've never sold a company before. Most people do it once and just have no idea how daunting it's going to be. Mm. And that's also part of the reason why people drop out. As in terms of, people that don't do it, right, don't get it done right. I had a client one time who was a very brilliant artist, and she built an online business all around her art and other similar art. Similar artists who needed, marketing and so forth. And she was, doing nicely, making, a little business, working out of her apartments, third-party logistics and so forth, and kind of set up the nice things to build a lifestyle business. And then she ended up getting introduced to VC, and they, convinced her to take all this money on as a convertible note, which is a debt instrument. And next thing you know is it's like, go, you got to do all this stuff. And it was the wrong stuff. And it was really a tremendous mismatch. And ultimately she came to understand that she never should have taken that money because her business model really wasn't built for that.
Right.
And there were a lot of challenges with this particular VC. So then she comes to me and she's like, I have to sell my business, which is the very worst thing you ever want to tell a business, and someone in my world, M&A, business work, what have you. Yeah. Every single time somebody says, you have to help me sell my company, it's like, there's probably nothing to sell. And in this case, it was a lifestyle business that had, a very significant amount of debt. It was a way to deal with the convertible debt instruments. But it was unfortunate because it could have been a really nice lifestyle business. And with the right structure, it potentially could have been something sellable, not a standalone business. But somebody might have acquired it had it been built appropriately, and it wasn't. So that's really, as they say, is, you have to continually think as an owner about what are my goals? What are my personal goals? What are my business goals? What are my financial goals? And build your business and your outcome that you want based on those goals.
Yeah, yeah. You know, Paul, you're touching on something that's really important to me, and I know to you as well, and that's the preparation that you go through 2 or 3 years or 4 years down the road before you want to sell your business or exit your business. And oftentimes, founders, CEOs, leaders of organizations do a really poor job in preparing and planning for this event. Why do you think that is? What goes through our heads as leaders? And I've made this mistake too. I told you this the other day.
Sure.
Why is
We're just too busy, in the business. Our heads are down. It's like trying to get $1 and turn $1 into $3 and $6 and then $36 million, what have you. And because of that, that planning element tends to get put aside because there's always another phone call, there's always another crisis, there's always another invoice to fill. And the difference between people who kind of have a little lifestyle business, and what by lifestyle means is they built a business that's completely around how they operate.
Sure.
And the people who build resilient companies, valuable companies, is at some point that business owner or owners said, wait a minute, what are we really trying to accomplish? Right? Which is probably the most powerful question anyone should ever ask themselves. Hey, what am I really trying to accomplish with this thing that I call my business?
Yeah.
So based on that, if there are the ability for the owner to stop and to say, how do I get customers? Is that processed correctly?
Yep.
Or optimized? What are the operations? Are we actually making the widgets the best way? Are we shipping the widgets the best way?
Yeah.
Are we hiring people?
Yeah.
Right? As you look at each of those elements, and I know I'm sort of preaching to the choir here, Mark, but very few owners do that. But most successful owners, and I mean people who build sometimes multi-million-dollar companies, they're very opportunistic. Oh, there's an opportunity. Let's grab that. Oh, we've got some revenue. We've got some profit. Sounds good. Without the discipline of saying, what's the risk of taking that on? Does that ultimately it may add value, it may add revenue, and it may add some profit, but to a potential acquirer, it's something like, what'd you do that for? Right? And so keeping in your mind, like, who would buy your company someday, or internally who would take it over? And here's a quick story. We had a gentleman who, second generation, built a nice business. And, he and the others in his generation, family business. And they got to a point where it's time for the next generation to take it over. And the next generation is, and they said they got a valuation for the business. It's a very asset heavy business. And the valuation came back and the next generation, we're not going to pay you for that. And believe it or not, the next generation said, you know what? We could easily buy these assets that actually help generate the cash flow used from somebody else, take the customer list and build the business ourselves and pay you guys nothing.
Yeah.
Because that company had not built things in place, any covenants, non-competes, any of those things. And they also had, which happens very often, is they were so petrified of debt that all their cash flow each year went to when they're buying new equipment, all right, to pay down that equipment really quick, and also reduce their tax liability. So they were very asset rich and profit poor.
Yep. Yeah, I think it goes back to the mindset that you talked about very early in the interview, and that was, you're here to help people. There's other folks in the migraine and aggravation business that are looking at the transaction, and they're counting they're counting the revenue basically. And I think there's the mindset with leaders who want to put a process in place, that want to have an operating system in their organization, versus the opportunistic leaders who want to drive revenue and they're basically chasing a buck. So that's basically the difference between the planners and the folks that are, you know, they want to sell, but there's no preparation to do that. You know, we're coming down to the end of the interview, Paul, but, you know, you and I met through a networking group. It was really fortuitous, and you pointed out some really cool things to me in that networking group. It wasn't necessarily built for what it was, what the benefit was, and that was that many of us got a chance to meet one another and maybe even work together. The inspiration that you have had over the years, where does that come from? Where are you, or who are you inspired by? Or what are you inspired?
I would say that, I mean, clearly there are lots of different people, and people have mentored me, you know, professionally and so forth. But I think the reason why, you know, I'm still at it, as I like to say, 40 years later, and I haven't retired like so many of my peers and family members and friends and so forth, is and come through so much, is my mom. And I know that's very, you know, it's kind of cliche in some ways, but you know, this is a woman who survived the Great Depression. She survived two extremely serious illnesses, had a long marriage to one guy, had 4 kids despite her illnesses. And, you know, she always was somebody who was like, you know, had this mentality is I'm going to thrive where I'm at. I'm going to keep pushing through. I'll get to the other side. And ultimately, you know, she lived a very long time, almost 90.
Wow.
And even though towards the very end of her life, you know, she, you know, had spent the last 2.5 years or so in a nursing home because of her physical health decline, intellectual, pretty strong.
Yeah.
Thank God. But I look at that life, you know, just step back and just say, you know, it just defines 2 things. The resilience, you know, getting through each day, but almost more importantly is gratitude.
Yeah.
You know, here think of a woman who actually was born into a middle-class life, and then the Great Depression hit. Her father's business suffered greatly. They lost the family home with, I think, 5 kids or 6 kids.
Wow.
Had to scramble and move, you know, and it didn't matter.
Yep.
You moved on. You moved on. You moved on.
Yep.
You know, lost her husband at a relatively young age. Didn't matter.
Yeah.
You move on.
Yep.
You make it work.
Wow.
You know, and she was definitely a woman of faith, and I think that was part of it. And I'm not trying to preach in any way, but I think that was also foundational to her ability to live with a sense of gratitude. Because let's face it, you know, there's always somebody, what is that saying? There's always somebody taller, richer, and thinner than you.
Yeah.
So get over it.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, that was great. I really appreciate that, and thank God for the moms out there like yours. I mean, that's wonderful. Thanks for joining us on Rainmakers Roundup. Just tell the audience how to get in touch with you, please, and.
Sure.
Yep.
Best way is just email me, Cronin, CRONIN, at TNAG.org. That's True North Advisory Group. And if that doesn't work, find me on LinkedIn, Paul F. Cronin.
Got it. Paul, thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on Rainmakers Roundup. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you soon. All right, folks.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure. Okay, folks, that is a wrap. We'll see you next time. Have a wonderful week, everyone.